The metallic clang echoed through Riverside Academy's main hallway like a death knell. 17-year-old Maya Chen stood frozen in front of her locker, watching helplessly as thick layers of ice sealed every gap around the metal door. Her breath came out in visible puffs from the industrial-strength coolant that had been sprayed through the vents, turning her locker into a solid block of ice. Inside, trapped behind the frozen barrier, were her laptop containing 3 months of coursework, her late grandmother's jade bracelet, and a USB drive with her college application essays, due that very afternoon. 3 senior girls stood behind her, their phones out recording every second of Maya's growing panic. The ringleader, Vanessa Sterling, daughter of the school's biggest donor, still held the empty canister of freeze spray she'd stolen from the chemistry lab. Her perfectly manicured nails tapped against the metal as she watched Maya's shoulders begin to shake. What those girls didn't know was that their cruel prank had just triggered a chain of events that would destroy their futures, expose years of covered-up harassment, and turn a shy girl into the most feared student Riverside Academy had ever seen. But what happened next when Maya's older sister discovered the frozen locker would become the most watched video in the school's prestigious 150-year history, spark a federal investigation, and prove that sometimes the quietest people make the loudest statements when they finally decide to speak. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Maya Chen had always been invisible at Riverside Academy, which was exactly how she preferred it. As a scholarship kid from the wrong side of town, attending one of the state's most exclusive prep schools, blending into the background felt safer than standing out. She kept her head down in the marble hallways, spoke only when called upon in class, and ate lunch alone in the library while reading coding manuals. Her plan was simple: survive 3 more months until graduation, then escape to MIT on a full computer science scholarship that would change her family's life forever. The targeting had started subtly in September. Small things that could be dismissed as accidents or misunderstandings. Her homework would mysteriously disappear from her backpack. Her lab partners would suddenly have to leave when paired with her. Her locker combination would be changed without notice, forcing embarrassing trips to the main office. Maya documented everything in an encrypted file on her laptop, including timestamps and witness names. But she told no one. Speaking up felt more dangerous than enduring it. Vanessa Sterling ruled Riverside Academy like a perfectly polished dictator. The 17-year-old blonde had never heard the word no in her life, and her father's donations funded everything. From the new science wing to the championship lacrosse field. She moved through the halls surrounded by her carefully curated inner circle, Madison Walsh, whose mother sat on the school board, and Sophia Reed, whose father owned half the commercial real estate in the city. Together, they formed an untouchable triangle of privilege that had never faced consequences for anything. Maya had made the fatal mistake of outperforming Vanessa in advanced calculus, scoring the only perfect grade on the midterm that Vanessa had been certain she'd ace. Worse, their teacher Mr. Patterson had used Maya's solution method as an example for the entire class, praising her innovative approach while Vanessa's more traditional method earned only a B+. That public embarrassment in front of 25 students had sealed Maya's fate, though she wouldn't realize it until weeks later when the real harassment campaign began. The psychological warfare escalated through October and November. Maya's car tires were mysteriously deflated every Friday, forcing her to miss her weekend job at the electronics store. Her scholarship application for summer coding camps was somehow withdrawn from the system, discovered only when rejection letters arrived for programs she'd never heard of. Most cruelly, fake social media accounts were created in her name, posting embarrassing content and reaching out to her MIT admissions counselor with inappropriate messages that nearly cost her the scholarship she'd worked 4 years to earn. Maya's younger brother Tommy had started asking why she came home from school looking defeated every day. Her mother, working double shifts at the hospital to keep their family afloat, noticed Maya had stopped talking about college with the same excitement. Her father, laid off from the factory last spring, watched his brilliant daughter shrinking into herself and felt helpless to protect her. The family that had sacrificed everything to give Maya opportunities was watching her slowly break apart, but Maya couldn't bring herself to tell them the truth. They'd given up too much already. The morning of the locker incident, Maya had arrived at school early to print her college essays in the computer lab before classes started. She'd spent months perfecting her personal statement about overcoming economic hardship through determination and academic excellence. The essays represented her escape route, her chance to lift her entire family out of poverty through education. She'd saved them on a USB drive and locked it safely in her locker, planning to submit all 5 applications during lunch period. Vanessa had been watching Maya's routine for weeks, noting when she arrived, which hallway she used, how she nervously checked her locker multiple times throughout the day. The freeze spray idea had come from Madison, whose chemistry lab partner had demonstrated the industrial coolant's power by flash freezing a flower until it shattered like glass. If they could seal Maya's locker shut on the day her college applications were due, she'd miss every deadline. No MAT scholarship, no escape from Riverside Academy's social hierarchy, no threat to Vanessa's carefully maintained superiority. The 3 girls had arrived at school before dawn, using Madison's mother's master key to access the chemistry lab. They'd studied YouTube videos on lock mechanisms, practiced with the spray canisters, and timed their approach perfectly. By the time Maya arrived at her locker that morning, the trap was set. Vanessa wanted her humiliation recorded, shared, and remembered. She wanted Maya to know exactly who had destroyed her future and why. Maya stood in that hallway feeling the walls of her carefully planned life crumbling around her. 4 years of perfect grades, countless hours of studying instead of socializing, her family's financial sacrifices, all threatened by a prank that would take hours to reverse. The applications were due by midnight, but she'd planned to submit them early to avoid any technical problems. Now she faced the impossible choice between breaking into her own locker and risking disciplinary action, or watching her dreams freeze solid along with her belongings. But Maya Chen had inherited more than intelligence from her family. Her grandmother had survived the Cultural Revolution through careful planning and quiet resistance. Her mother navigated hospital politics while advocating for patients who couldn't speak for themselves. Her father had organized his factory's successful union drive through strategic thinking and coalition building. Maya had learned that sometimes the most powerful response isn't immediate retaliation, but patient planning followed by devastating execution. Maya stared at the frozen metal barrier that contained her entire future, her reflection distorted in the icy surface. Behind her, Vanessa's voice carried that particular tone of manufactured sweetness that made Maya's skin crawl. "Oh no, Maya, what happened to your locker? That looks really serious. Maybe you should call maintenance though. I doubt they'll be able to fix it before. What time are those college applications due again?" The hallway had begun filling with students arriving for first period, and Maya could feel their stares burning into her back. Some pulled out phones to record the spectacle, others whispered among themselves, but nobody moved to help. This was Riverside Academy's unspoken rule: stay out of Vanessa Sterling's way, even if it meant watching an innocent person suffer. Maya's hands trembled as she touched the ice coating her locker handle, feeling the coldness seep through her fingertips, like a physical manifestation of her despair. Madison Walsh stepped closer, her designer boots clicking against the polished marble floor. "You know, I heard MIT is really strict about application deadlines. Like, they don't make exceptions for anyone, even scholarship kids." Her emphasis on the last 2 words was deliberate. designed to remind everyone within earshot of Maya's outsider status in their world of privilege and wealth. Sophia Reed giggled behind her hand, the sound sharp and cutting in the morning quiet. Maya closed her eyes and tried to calculate solutions. The ice was too thick to chip away quickly, and using hot water might damage the electronics inside. She could report the vandalism to administration, but Vanessa's father practically owned the school board. The girls would claim innocence, suggest it was a malfunction or accident, and Maya would be labeled a troublemaker for making accusations against Riverside Academy royalty. Her scholarship could be threatened for creating drama, and her college recommendations could be quietly sabotaged. "I think she's going to cry," Sophia announced loudly enough for the growing crowd to hear. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. This is actually really sad. I almost feel bad for her. But there was no sympathy in her voice, only the satisfied cruelty of someone watching their carefully planned destruction unfold exactly as intended. Maya kept her eyes closed, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her break down in public. Vanessa moved even closer, close enough that Maya could smell her expensive perfume mixed with the chemical residue from the freeze spray. "You know what I don't understand, Maya? You work so hard, you study all the time, you think you're so much smarter than everyone else, but you can't even protect your own stuff. Maybe that tells you something about where you really belong." Her voice dropped to a whisper that only Maya could hear. "Some people are meant to serve, not succeed. This is just the universe correcting itself." The words hit Maya like physical blows, each syllable designed to tear down everything she'd built her identity around. Her academic achievements, her dreams of lifting her family out of poverty, her belief that hard work and intelligence could overcome any obstacle. All of it felt fragile and foolish in the face of Vanessa's casual cruelty. Maya had spent 4 years believing that if she just kept her head down and excelled academically, she could escape this place unscathed. Now she realized how naive that hope had been. Students continued gathering in the hallway, drawn by the drama like spectators at a gladiator fight. Maya recognized faces from her classes, kids she'd helped with homework or partnered with on group projects, but none of them stepped forward to defend her. The social hierarchy at Riverside Academy was rigid and merciless. Crossing Vanessa Sterling meant becoming her next target, and nobody wanted to risk their own carefully maintained positions in the school's ecosystem. Maya opened her eyes and looked directly at Vanessa for the first time that morning. She saw the satisfaction gleaming in those cold blue eyes, the pleasure Vanessa took in wielding her power over someone she viewed as inferior. Maya understood in that moment that this wasn't just about the calculus grade or college applications. This was about maintaining order, about putting someone who dared to outshine their social superior back in their designated place. "Say something," Vanessa taunted, her voice growing louder as more students gathered to watch. "Defend yourself. Fight back." "Oh wait, you can't, can you? Because you know exactly what happens to scholarship kids who make trouble at schools like this." She gestured around the hallway with its crystal chandeliers and oil paintings of distinguished alumni. "This isn't your world, Maya. It never was, and it never will be." Maya felt something break inside her chest, not her spirit, but something deeper and more dangerous. The careful control she'd maintained for 4 years began to fracture, and underneath the quiet, compliant exterior she'd cultivated, something far more formidable started to surface. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory, speaking in Mandarin about the patience required to survive impossible situations and the precision needed to strike back when the moment finally arrived. The hallway suddenly fell silent as the main entrance doors burst open with enough force to rattle the vintage stained glass panels. Every head turned toward the sound, conversation stopping mid-sentence as a figure strode through the doorway. With military precision, Maya's older sister Lily Chen had arrived at Riverside Academy for the first time since her graduation 5 years earlier, but she looked nothing like the shy valedictorian who'd once walked these same halls. Lily wore the sharp black suit of a federal prosecutor, her FBI credentials clearly visible on her belt alongside the outline of her service weapon. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun that emphasized the sharp intelligence in her dark eyes that were currently scanning the crowd with the focused intensity of someone trained to identify threats and neutralize them efficiently. She'd driven straight from the courthouse where she'd been preparing for a major white-collar crime trial, but the frantic text from her younger brother Tommy had sent her racing across the city. Students instinctively moved aside as Lily approached, her heels clicking against the marble with each measured step. She took in the scene immediately, her little sister standing before the frozen locker, the 3 girls with their phones out recording, the crowd of spectators, and the obvious power dynamic at play. Lily had prosecuted enough hate crimes and harassment cases to recognize the setup instantly. Her expression remained neutral, but anyone who knew her well would have noticed the slight tightening around her eyes that meant someone was about to have a very bad day. Maya looked up as her sister approached, and for the first time that morning, hope flickered in her chest. Lily had always been her protector, the one person who'd never backed down from a fight when someone threatened their family. But this was different. This wasn't their old neighborhood where Lily's reputation and connections could solve problems. This was Riverside Academy, where the Sterling family name carried more weight than federal badges and legal degrees. Vanessa's confidence faltered slightly as she took in Lily's professional appearance and obvious authority, but her privileged upbringing had taught her that charm and family connections could overcome any obstacle. She stepped forward with her practiced smile, the same one that had gotten her out of trouble countless times before. "Hi there, I'm Vanessa Sterling. I don't think we've met. Are you here for parent conferences? Because those aren't until next week." Lily stopped directly in front of Vanessa, close enough that the teenager had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. When she spoke, her voice carried the calm authority of someone accustomed to questioning suspects and presenting cases before federal judges. "Special Agent Lily Chen, FBI White Collar Crime Division. I'm here about the systematic harassment and destruction of property that's been targeting my sister." She held up her phone, already recording. "And I believe you just provided me with a confession on camera." The color drained from Vanessa's face as the words FBI and confession registered in her brain. Around the hallway, students who had been casually recording the drama suddenly realized they might be witnessing something far more serious than typical high school bullying. Phones began disappearing into pockets as the legal implications of their voyeurism dawned on them. Madison and Sophia exchanged panicked glances, both taking unconscious steps backward from their ringleader. Lily continued recording as she spoke, her voice carrying the practiced cadence of someone who'd spent years building airtight cases against white-collar criminals. "Destruction of property over $500 constitutes a felony in this state. Systematic harassment targeting a victim's academic opportunities falls under federal civil rights violations. And since this appears to be racially motivated, targeting of one of the few Asian students at this institution, we're looking at potential hate crime charges." She paused, letting each word sink in. "But please, continue explaining how this isn't what it looks like." Vanessa's usual confidence cracked completely as she realized her carefully maintained world of privilege wouldn't protect her from federal charges. She'd grown up believing that her father's donations and social connections made her untouchable within the Riverside Academy ecosystem, but FBI agents operated in an entirely different sphere of power. Her voice came out smaller than she'd ever heard it sound. "This is just a misunderstanding. We were just joking around. Maya knows we didn't mean anything serious by it." Maya watched her sister work with growing amazement. Lily had transformed from protective older sibling into a federal prosecutor building a case in real time, and the shift was both terrifying and magnificent to witness. This was why Lily had graduated valedictorian from Riverside Academy before, earning full scholarships to Harvard Law and then joining the FBI's elite white-collar crime unit. She didn't just see problems. She saw prosecutable offenses with evidence chains and conviction rates. Joking around, Lily repeated, her tone suggesting she was taking mental notes for future depositions. So you're admitting to deliberately freezing my sister's locker shut on the day her college applications are due. You're acknowledging that this was intentional rather than accidental. And you're claiming this systematic campaign of harassment that I've been documenting for the past 10 minutes is somehow humorous. She gestured to her phone, still recording every word. The mention of documentation sent visible terror through all three girls. They'd assumed their harassment campaign had been subtle enough to avoid official notice, but Lily's words suggested otherwise. Madison found her voice first, desperation making her words tumble out rapidly. We don't know anything about any campaign. This was just today, just the locker thing, and that was Vanessa's idea, not ours. Lily's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. Interesting. So you're willing to testify that Vanessa Sterling planned and executed this attack while you merely participated as accessories. That's very helpful for plea negotiations down the line. She made a show of adding notes to her phone. Madison Walsh and Sophia Reed, willing to cooperate in exchange for reduced charges. The prosecution appreciates defendants who save the court time. Sophia began crying openly now, her carefully applied makeup running down her cheeks in dark streaks. Please, we're just kids. We made a mistake. Can't we just apologize and fix Maya's locker? My dad will pay for whatever damage there is. We don't need lawyers or courts or anything like that. Her voice rose to a near wail that echoed off the marble walls. The gathered crowd of students watched in stunned silence as their school's social hierarchy collapsed in real time. Vanessa Sterling, who'd ruled Riverside Academy through fear and privilege for 4 years, was being methodically dismantled by someone who understood power structures far more sophisticated than high school social dynamics. The same students who'd been afraid to intervene on Maya's behalf now witnessed firsthand what happened when bullies encountered someone who couldn't be intimidated or bought off. Lily pulled out her official FBI credentials and held them where the security cameras could capture them clearly. I'm placing you three under citizen's arrest for destruction of property and conspiracy to interfere with educational opportunities. You have the right to remain silent, though you've already waived that quite thoroughly. She looked directly at Vanessa. You have the right to an attorney, though given your father's political connections, you'll want someone who specializes in federal criminal defense rather than local civil matters. Principal Harrison emerged from his office at the far end of the hallway, drawn by the commotion and the growing crowd of students. His face went pale when he recognized Lily Chen and saw her FBI credentials displayed prominently. He'd been hoping to handle whatever was happening quietly, the way Riverside Academy typically managed problems involving prominent families, but federal involvement changed everything dramatically. Agent Chen, he said carefully, approaching with the nervous deference of someone who understood exactly how precarious his position had become. I'm sure we can resolve this through internal disciplinary measures. There's no need to involve outside authorities in what appears to be a student disagreement. His voice carried the desperate hope of a man watching his career prospects evaporate in real time. Lily turned her attention to the principal, and her expression shifted from prosecutorial focus to something far more dangerous. Principal Harrison. Perfect timing. I was just about to request all documentation regarding harassment complaints filed by my sister over the past 4 months. I'm particularly interested in reviewing your response protocols and any disciplinary actions taken against these 3 students for previous incidents. Harrison's Adam's apple bobbed nervously as he swallowed hard. I'm not certain we have any formal complaints on file. Students are encouraged to work through conflicts using peer mediation and restorative justice approaches. We prefer to handle these matters without creating permanent disciplinary records that might affect college applications. The principal's words hung in the air like an admission of guilt. Lily's eyes narrowed as she processed the implications of his statement. So you're confirming that Riverside Academy has a policy of not documenting harassment complaints in order to protect the college prospects of perpetrators. That's a fascinating approach to Title Leaks compliance. I'm sure the Department of Education will be very interested in your innovative interpretation of federal anti-discrimination law. Maya watched her sister systematically destroy every defense and excuse the school's power structure could mount. This wasn't just about the frozen locker anymore. It was about years of systematic failures that had allowed privileged students to terrorize their victims without consequences. Lily was exposing the entire corrupt system that had protected Vanessa and her friends while leaving Maya to suffer in silence. Vanessa made one last desperate attempt to regain control of the situation. My father is Richard Sterling. He's donated millions to this school. He sits on the board of directors. You can't just come in here and threaten students like this. There are proper channels for handling disputes. But her voice lacked conviction, and everyone present could hear the fear underneath her bravado. Lily's smile became genuinely terrifying as she pulled out her phone and began dialing. You're absolutely right. Let's call your father right now. I'm sure he'll be fascinated to learn that his daughter is facing federal criminal charges, and that his alma mater is about to be investigated for systematic civil rights violations. She held up the phone. Should I mention that his political career will probably survive a scandal involving his teenage daughter's hate crimes? I've prosecuted several politicians, and family criminality tends to be particularly damaging during election cycles. The phone rang 3 times before a gruff voice answered. Sterling Development, Richard Sterling speaking. Even through the speaker, his voice carried the practiced authority of someone accustomed to being the most important person in any room. Lily held the phone where everyone could hear as she introduced herself with clinical precision. Mr. Sterling, this is Special Agent Lily Chen with the FBI's White Collar Crime Division. I'm currently at Riverside Academy investigating criminal charges against your daughter Vanessa. I wanted to give you the courtesy of notification before we proceed with formal arrest procedures. Her tone was professionally neutral, but Maya could see the satisfied gleam in her sister's eyes as shocked silence filled the hallway. The pause stretched for nearly 10 seconds before Richard Sterling's voice returned, noticeably strained. I'm sorry, did you say arrest? For what possible reason would federal agents be involving themselves in high school matters? But beneath his bluster, Maya could hear the careful calculation of someone whose political instincts were already assessing damage control scenarios. Lily consulted her phone as if reading from official notes. Destruction of property exceeding felony thresholds, conspiracy to interfere with educational opportunities, and systematic harassment that appears to meet federal hate crime criteria. Your daughter has been quite cooperative in providing detailed confessions, which will expedite the prosecution process significantly. She paused for effect. I assume you'll want to retain counsel experienced in federal criminal defense. The sound of Richard Sterling's chair creaking came through the phone as he presumably sat down heavily. Agent Chen, I'm certain there's been some misunderstanding. Vanessa is an honor roll student with no disciplinary history. Whatever happened today, I'm sure it can be resolved through appropriate school channels without involving law enforcement. His voice had shifted to the careful diplomacy of someone suddenly realizing they were outmatched. Maya watched Vanessa's face crumble as she heard her father's confidence evaporate in real time. The man who'd always swept her problems away with donations and phone calls was encountering something beyond his sphere of influence. Federal criminal charges couldn't be negotiated away with school board connections or charitable contributions, and both father and daughter were beginning to understand the gravity of their situation. Principal Harrison stepped forward desperately, his career preservation instincts overriding his better judgment. "Mr. Sterling, perhaps if we could discuss this privately." "Agent Chen, surely we can find a reasonable resolution that serves everyone's interests without escalating to criminal proceedings." His voice carried the pleading tone of someone watching years of careful relationship, building with powerful families, disintegrate before his eyes. Lily turned her attention back to the principal with the focused intensity of a predator who'd identified weakness. "Principal Harrison, I'm curious about your suggestion that we resolve federal crimes through private discussions. Are you proposing that Riverside Academy operates outside normal legal frameworks? Because that would constitute obstruction of justice, which carries its own federal penalties." She began typing notes on her phone again. "Should I add your name to the investigation file?" The color drained completely from Harrison's face as he realized his attempt to protect the school had instead implicated him in potential criminal activity. Around the hallway, students who'd been recording the confrontation began backing away as they grasped that they might be witnessing the collapse of their school's entire administrative structure. The drama that had started as entertainment was becoming something far more serious and legally dangerous. Richard Sterling's voice crackled through the phone speaker, desperation now clearly audible. "Agent Chen, what exactly would constitute an appropriate resolution from your perspective? I'm prepared to make substantial restitution for any damages and fund whatever educational programs might prevent similar incidents in the future." Maya recognized the tone from countless movies about powerful men trying to buy their way out of consequences. "Mr. Sterling, you're essentially offering bribes to a federal agent investigating your daughter's crimes. I should probably mention that this conversation is being recorded as evidence." Lily's smile was visible in her voice. "Your daughter destroyed specialized equipment belonging to a scholarship student on the day college applications were due. She's documented months of systematic harassment designed to sabotage educational opportunities. These aren't civil matters that can be resolved through donations." Maya felt something shifting inside her chest as she listened to her sister methodically dismantle the power structure that had oppressed her for months. For the first time since starting at Riverside Academy, she wasn't afraid. The careful documentation she'd been keeping, the screenshots of fake social media accounts, the times and dates of every incident, suddenly felt like weapons rather than desperate proof of her victimization. Vanessa finally found her voice again, though it came out as a desperate whisper. "Maya, please. Tell your sister this is all a misunderstanding. We can fix your locker right now. I'll personally make sure all your applications get submitted on time. We can forget this whole thing ever happened." Her usual commanding presence had dissolved into barely contained panic as the reality of federal prosecution sank in. Maya looked at Vanessa for a long moment, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time. Not as an untouchable queen of the social hierarchy, but as a scared teenager who'd never faced real consequences for her actions. The power dynamic that had defined their relationship for 4 years had completely reversed, and Maya realized she was no longer the helpless victim in this scenario. "You want me to tell my sister it's a misunderstanding," Maya said quietly, her voice carrying to every corner of the silent hallway. "The way you freezing my locker on application deadline day was a misunderstanding. The way you created fake social media accounts to harass me was a misunderstanding. The way you've spent months trying to destroy my academic future was a misunderstanding." Her voice grew stronger with each word. "Which part exactly was the misunderstanding, Vanessa?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Around them, students who'd never heard Maya speak above a whisper stared in shock as the quiet girl they'd ignored for 4 years finally found her voice. Phone cameras that had been hidden were slowly emerging again as classmates realized they We're witnessing a transformation that would become legendary in Riverside Academy history. Lily handed her phone to Maya, the recording still active. Your turn, little sister. Tell everyone exactly what you've been documenting for the past 4 months. Let them hear what systematic harassment actually looks like when someone bothers to keep detailed records. Her voice carried pride and encouragement, but also the steel of someone who'd built her career on ensuring victims found their voices in courtrooms. Maya took the phone with steady hands, no longer trembling as she had that morning. My name is Maya Chen, and I've been keeping detailed documentation of harassment, vandalism, and systematic attempts to sabotage my education at Riverside Academy. She looked directly at the security camera above the main office door. I have timestamps, screenshots, witness names, and video evidence of everything these 3 students have done to me over the past 4 months. Madison's legs gave out completely, and she sat down hard on the marble floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Sophia had pressed herself against the wall, as if trying to disappear entirely. But Vanessa remained standing, though swaying slightly, as the full scope of Maya's preparation became clear. The quiet girl they'd targeted for being vulnerable had been building a federal case against them the entire time. Through the phone speaker, Richard Sterling's voice returned with barely controlled fury. Vanessa, what have you done? How could you be stupid enough to systematically harass someone whose sister works for the FBI? The political calculation in his voice was obvious as he began distancing himself from his daughter's actions. Agent Chen, I want to make it clear that my daughter acted without my knowledge or approval. Maya felt a surge of something she'd never experienced before, real power. Not the borrowed authority of wealth or family connections, but the genuine strength that came from preparation, intelligence, and having right on her side. She looked at each of the 3 girls who'd made her life miserable, then at Principal Harrison, who'd ignored her pleas for help, and finally at the crowd of students who'd watched her suffer in silence. The applications are due at midnight, Maya said calmly into the phone. I have backup copies of everything saved in multiple locations. Your daughter's prank failed. She handed the phone back to Lily. But I think she's about to discover what real consequences feel like. The juvenile detention hearing took place 3 weeks later in a courthouse packed with media representatives and concerned parents. Maya sat in the front row wearing her best outfit, a navy blazer that belonged to Lily, watching as Vanessa Sterling was led into the courtroom in handcuffs. The transformation was startling. The confident queen of Riverside Academy had been replaced by a hollow-eyed teenager who looked smaller and more fragile than Maya had ever imagined possible. Judge Patricia Morales had a reputation for taking youth crimes seriously, particularly those involving harassment and hate crimes. She'd seen too many cases where early intervention could have prevented escalating criminal behavior, and she wasn't interested in hearing about privileged backgrounds or family contributions to society. As she reviewed the extensive evidence file that Lily had compiled, her expression grew increasingly stern. The prosecution presented a devastating case. Maya's 4 months of meticulous documentation painted a picture of systematic psychological warfare designed to destroy an academically gifted student's future. The fake social media accounts, the sabotaged scholarship applications, the deliberate isolation campaign, and finally the frozen locker incident on application deadline day showed a level of premeditation that shocked even seasoned court officials. When the prosecutor played the recordings from that morning in the hallway, several jury members visibly recoiled at Vanessa's casual cruelty. Vanessa's defense attorney, one of the city's most expensive criminal lawyers, struggled to present any coherent argument beyond requesting leniency due to her age and lack of prior arrests. But when Maya took the witness stand and calmly recounted months of harassment while displaying her detailed evidence files, any sympathy for the defendant evaporated. Maya's testimony was precise, factual, and devastating. She spoke without anger or vindictiveness, simply presenting the truth with the clarity of someone who'd learned to document everything, because nobody had believed her before. Madison Walsh and Sophia Reed had accepted plea agreements weeks earlier, testifying against Vanessa in exchange for reduced sentences. Their testimony revealed additional details about the harassment campaign that even Maya hadn't known about. They'd coordinated with students at other schools to spread rumors about Maya's family being involved in criminal activity. They'd contacted her potential employers to make false complaints about her character. They'd even attempted to hack into her MIT admissions file to sabotage her application directly. The scope of their malicious campaign became clearer as more evidence emerged. During the trial proceedings, digital forensics experts had traced the fake social media accounts back to devices registered to all three girls, revealing a sophisticated operation that had been running for months. They'd created elaborate false personas designed to humiliate Maya in online spaces, posting fabricated stories about her family's financial situation and spreading lies about her academic integrity. Screenshots of group chats showed them coordinating their attacks with military precision, celebrating each successful sabotage attempt like victories in a war. When sentencing day arrived, Judge Morales delivered a verdict that sent shockwaves through Riverside Academy's privileged community. Vanessa Sterling was sentenced to 2 years in juvenile detention, followed by 3 years of supervised probation and 500 hours of community service specifically working with disabled and minority students. Madison and Sophia each received 1 year of detention and extensive community service requirements. More importantly, all three girls would have permanent criminal records that would follow them through college applications and future employment opportunities. The civil lawsuit that Lily filed on Maya's behalf proved even more devastating to the Sterling family's reputation and finances. Richard Sterling's political career ended abruptly when voters learned about his daughter's hate crimes and his attempts to interfere with the federal investigation. The family's business suffered as clients and partners distanced themselves from the scandal. The $2 million settlement that Maya ultimately received included provisions for counseling, educational support, and a formal public apology that was broadcast on every major news network. Principal Harrison's resignation came quietly on a Friday afternoon, announced in a brief email to the school community that cited personal reasons for his departure. The real reason became public knowledge when the Department of Education released its scathing report on Riverside Academy's systematic failure to address harassment complaints, particularly those involving minority and scholarship students. The school faced federal oversight for the next 5 years and was required to implement comprehensive anti-bullying policies with serious enforcement mechanisms. The investigation revealed that Maya's case was far from isolated. Federal auditors discovered 17 other instances over the past 5 years where harassment complaints involving wealthy students had been minimized or ignored entirely. The pattern showed clear institutional bias toward protecting donors' children while sacrificing vulnerable students who lacked family connections or financial leverage. Several other families came forward with stories of their children facing similar treatment, leading to additional lawsuits and settlements that ultimately cost the school millions of dollars. Maya's college applications were submitted successfully, with time to spare, thanks to the backup file she'd maintained on multiple cloud storage platforms. Her personal essay about overcoming systematic harassment while maintaining academic excellence resonated powerfully with admissions committees. MIT not only accepted her, but offered additional scholarship money and invited her to speak at their incoming freshman orientation about resilience and documentation of discrimination. The viral video of Maya's confrontation with Vanessa had been viewed over 50 million times across various social media platforms, making Maya an inadvertent spokesperson for students facing harassment. She received hundreds of messages from young people around the world who were documenting their own experiences with bullying and discrimination. Many credited her example with giving them the courage to speak up and seek help rather than suffering in silence. The impact of Maya's story extended far beyond individual inspiration. Educational consultants began incorporating harassment documentation training into their programs for vulnerable students. Parent groups organized workshops on recognizing signs of systematic harassment and advocating effectively within school systems. Legal advocacy organizations developed new protocols based on Maya's evidence-gathering techniques, creating standardized approaches for building cases against institutional discrimination. Lily's investigation had uncovered a pattern of problems at elite private schools across the state, leading to a broader federal inquiry into how wealthy institutions handled harassment complaints. She was promoted to head a new FBI task force focused on educational civil rights violations, with Maya's case serving as the blueprint for future prosecutions. The sisters became a formidable team, with Maya's technological skills complementing Lily's legal expertise as they worked to protect other vulnerable students. The most satisfying moment for Maya came 6 months later when she returned to Riverside Academy as a guest speaker for their mandatory anti-bullying assembly. She walked into the same auditorium where she'd once sat invisible and ignored, now commanding the attention of every student and faculty member. Her speech was simple but powerful, focusing on the importance of documentation, seeking help from appropriate authorities, and never accepting that systematic harassment was just a normal part of school life. During the question and answer session, a freshman girl raised her hand nervously. What if the people hurting you are popular and nobody believes you when you report it? Maya smiled, remembering her own desperate visits to Principal Harrison's office that had been dismissed and ignored. Document everything with dates and times. Save screenshots and recordings. Tell multiple adults until someone listens. And remember that the truth always has more power than popularity, but only if you're prepared to prove it. The girl nodded seriously, and Maya noticed several other students taking notes. She realized that her experience had created a new template for students facing similar situations. They no longer had to suffer in silence or hope that adults would protect them without evidence. Maya had shown them that systematic preparation and legal advocacy could triumph over even the most entrenched systems of privilege and power. Maya's freshman year at MIT exceeded every expectation she'd held during those dark months at Riverside Academy. Her work-study position in the computer science department led to research opportunities, typically reserved for graduate students. Her coding skills, honed through years of creating documentation systems and evidence files, impressed professors who invited her to collaborate on projects involving digital security and harassment prevention technologies. The scholarship money from her settlement with the Sterling family had eliminated her family's financial struggles, allowing her parents to focus on their own education and career development. Her mother returned to nursing school to become a nurse practitioner, while her father started a small construction company that specialized in accessibility modifications for disabled homeowners. Tommy, inspired by his sister's example, became an advocate for students with learning disabilities at his own school. Maya's relationship with technology evolved from mere academic interest to passionate advocacy. She developed an app called Safe Space that allowed students to securely document harassment incidents with automatic timestamps and backup storage. The app included features for anonymous reporting to school administrators and could compile evidence packages for legal proceedings. Within 2 years, SafeSpace was being used in school districts across the country, helping thousands of students build cases against their tormentors. The development of SafeSpace required Maya to relive her own trauma repeatedly as she designed features based on her experiences at Riverside Academy. She worked with trauma counselors and legal experts to ensure the app provided both emotional support and practical tools for victims. The app included crisis intervention features, connecting users with counselors and legal advocates when situations became dangerous. It also provided educational resources about students' rights and institutional obligations under federal anti-discrimination laws. The most unexpected development came when Grayson Mitchell, one of Maya's former classmates at Riverside Academy, reached out during her sophomore year at MIT. He'd witnessed the hallway confrontation and had been deeply affected by seeing Maya's quiet dignity in the face of systematic cruelty. He'd transferred to a public school, started volunteering with anti-bullying organizations, and was studying social work with a focus on protecting vulnerable students. His message was simple. He wanted to apologize for his silence and ask how he could help other students avoid Maya's experience. Maya's response surprised even herself. Rather than rejecting his apology, she invited him to beta test new features for SafeSpace and provide feedback from the perspective of a bystander who'd failed to intervene. Their collaboration led to additional app features focused on empowering witnesses to safely report harassment and support victims. Grayson became one of SafeSpace's most effective advocates, speaking at schools about the importance of breaking the silence that enabled systematic harassment. The ripple effects of Maya's case continued expanding throughout her college years. Riverside Academy implemented peer mediation programs, anonymous reporting systems, and strict accountability measures for administrators who failed to address harassment complaints. Other elite schools proactively adopted similar policies rather than risk federal investigations. The Department of Education cited Maya's case in new federal guidelines for addressing harassment in educational settings. Maya's academic performance at MIT reflected her transformation from victim to leader. She graduated summa cum laude with a double major in computer science and public policy, writing her senior thesis on technological solutions for institutional discrimination. Her research caught the attention of major technology companies and government agencies, leading to job offers that would have secured her financial future for life. But Maya had different plans. The technology company that Maya founded immediately after graduation focused exclusively on developing tools for documenting and preventing harassment in educational and workplace settings. Her first major contract came from the Department of Education, which wanted to implement SafeSpace technology in schools receiving federal funding. Within 5 years, Maya's company was valued at over $50 million, making her one of the youngest self-made millionaires in the technology sector. But financial success wasn't what drove Maya's continued advocacy work. The letters and messages she received from students who'd used her documentation techniques to escape harassment situations provided the real motivation. A girl in Ohio who'd used SafeSpace to document workplace harassment and won a lawsuit against her employer. A boy in California whose detailed evidence files led to the arrest of students who'd been physically assaulting him. A transgender student in Texas whose methodical documentation resulted in federal civil rights charges against their school district. Each success story validated Maya's belief that systematic oppression could be defeated through systematic resistance. She expanded her company's mission beyond individual protection tools, developing institutional assessment software that helped schools and employers identify patterns of discrimination before they became legal liabilities. The software analyzed complaint patterns, response times, and resolution outcomes to flag potential civil rights violations automatically. Maya's story became required reading in law schools, studying civil rights enforcement, and in education programs teaching harassment prevention. Her testimony before congressional committees led to stronger federal protections for students facing systematic harassment. The Maya Chen documentation protocol became standard practice for civil rights attorneys handling educational discrimination cases. The personal cost of Maya's advocacy work was substantial but manageable thanks to the support system she'd built. Regular therapy sessions helped her process the ongoing trauma of reliving her experiences. through victim testimonies and case consultations. Her relationship with her family had grown stronger through shared commitment to protecting vulnerable people. Lily's career had flourished as she became the FBI's leading expert on educational discrimination, while their parents had found new purpose in community advocacy work. Maya's dating life had been complicated by her public profile and the emotional demands of her work, but she'd found love with a fellow MIT graduate who shared her commitment to social justice. Dr. James Wu was a civil rights attorney who specialized in disability discrimination cases, and their relationship was built on mutual respect for each other's professional missions. Their engagement made headlines when Maya announced that their wedding registry would include donations to scholarship funds for harassment victims. The final validation of Maya's transformation came 10 years after the frozen locker incident, when she was invited to deliver the commencement address at Harvard Law School, where Lily had earned her degree. Maya stood before an audience of future lawyers and advocates, many of whom would go on to protect victims of harassment and discrimination in their own careers. 10 years ago, I was a scared girl whose locker was frozen shut on the most important day of her academic career, Maya told the graduating class. Today, I'm standing here as proof that documentation beats intimidation, that preparation trumps privilege, and that systematic oppression can be defeated by systematic resistance. But none of us fights alone. Every victory against injustice creates tools and techniques that others can use. Every person who refuses to accept harassment as normal makes it easier for the next victim to find their voice. As applause filled Harvard's historic auditorium, Maya spotted familiar faces in the crowd. Lily sat in the front row, beaming with pride at her little sister's journey from victim to advocate to leader. Several members of Maya's MIT graduating class had returned to hear her speak, including professors who guided her research into harassment prevention technology. Most surprisingly, Grayson Mitchell sat near the back, now a licensed social worker who'd spent his career protecting vulnerable students and crediting Maya's example with showing him the path to redemption. Maya's closing words resonated far beyond the graduation ceremony, spreading across social media and inspiring a new generation of students facing their own battles against systematic harassment. To every person watching this who feels powerless against bullies or institutions that protect them, document everything. Seek allies who understand real power, and remember that your silence protects those who hurt you while your voice protects those who come after you. The choice is always yours, but the tools are now available. Use them. The standing ovation lasted 15 minutes, but Maya's real victory had been built through years of patient work, transforming her own trauma into protection for others. From the frozen locker at Riverside Academy to the Harvard Law School podium, Maya Chen had proven that the most powerful revenge against systematic oppression was building systems that prevented future victims from suffering alone. After the Harvard commencement, Maya returned to her company headquarters in Boston, where a team of 50 programmers, lawyers, and advocates worked on expanding the reach of harassment prevention technology. The office walls were lined with thank you letters from students, workers, and families whose lives had been changed by the tools Maya had developed. Each letter represented a victory against the kind of systematic cruelty that had once made Maya's life unbearable. The irony wasn't lost on Maya that Vanessa Sterling had ultimately created the conditions for her own obsolescence. By targeting Maya so systematically and documenting their harassment so thoroughly, Vanessa had provided the blueprint for Maya's counterstrike. The same attention to detail and long-term planning that had made Vanessa's campaign so devastating had become the foundation for Maya's protective systems. Maya's final triumph came not through personal revenge, but through structural change that made future Vanessas irrelevant. The documentation protocols, legal frameworks, and institutional accountability measures that grew from Maya's case had shifted power away from privileged bullies toward their victims. Schools and employers now faced real consequences for ignoring harassment, while victims had access to tools and advocates that Maya had created from her own pain. In quiet moments, Maya sometimes wondered what had become of Vanessa Sterling after her release from juvenile detention. She'd heard rumors about failed college applications, family financial struggles, and social isolation that mirrored Maya's own high school experience. But Maya felt no satisfaction in Vanessa's downfall. The real victory was that other students would never have to endure what Maya had suffered, because the systems were now in place to protect them. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.